In this video, I just wanted to give you a little run through of my thumbnail creator. I'm fundamentally lazy and I didn't want to have to do too much editing when I started to put these tutorials out. So I thought I would use the Unreal Engine widget system to help me create my thumbnails, basically. Let's have a look. I've got a widget, a HUD called Lesson HUD. And within that, I've got a whole framework where I have a text contain wrapper that has got 4 lines of text. I have got some hidden buttons in here that let me trigger a few things. If I'm not happy with the clouds that have been generated, I can click down here in the bottom left and it will re-trigger that randomly. And in my earlier videos, I had a couple of sound effects that were also part of the thumbnail screen, which I've now kind of dropped because I'm annoyed by it already, and I'm sure it's started to annoy a few other people as well. So I've toned that down. So now when I come into Unreal Engine, in my setup actor, which is just represented here with a widget in 3D space, I have got a series of variables in there that are exposed. So when I click on the actor in the world outliner, I can very quickly come here and edit what I want it to be. Is this video an explainer video, or is it part of the 5-minute series? How many lines does it have? 2, 3 or 4 lines. Depending on what I select here, it shifts the position of that text box so it aligns with the space allocated. I'll show you that in a moment. What's the title? Should that line of text be in bold? That's then repeated for the 4 lines. I've just limited the widget to 4 lines. And then what topic does it fit under? So I've got an enumerator here which gives me control over any subcategories that I'm starting to create tutorials for. The benefit of doing this is that I've got colors allocated to each of these, I've got titles allocated to each of these, and now that I've set that up once, I know that they will be consistent and I don't have to worry about that. So I'll explain all that too. And when I launch the project, should I launch the title page at all? So we've got our Boolean here. Yes, that's ticked. So I will launch the screen. Let's just save that for the moment. And there we are. There's our explainer channel thumbnail creator. So here, as I say, I can kind of move around and choose. The clouds there aren't fantastic. So if I come down to the bottom left-hand corner and click that hidden button, I'm re-triggering. So I get some nicer clouds. I think, oh, okay, well, that's okay. I don't spend too much time on it. And I could have a keystroke that I then output a JPEG to, but I just thought it'd be much easier just to print the screen. So I click that, and then that bit of the video is done. And with YouTube, I just add that as the thumbnail. So that's super, super simple. But let's come in and have a look at our setup actor. If you followed any of my previous videos for framework, looking at the game instance, and at avoiding using the level blueprint, the alternative to the level blueprint is I always add a setup actor of some type. So here I've called it setup. Within this actor, I've just put all my actions on event begin play. So that was our first Boolean. Launch title page. So I've just got a Boolean that again I have made instance editable, hence it's showing up here and we have it triggered. So if it's true, then continue with everything else. So this actor I'm putting in and setting that reference to my game instance. So if you've not seen my game instance video, if you look under the framework playlist, I would encourage you to look at that because that will give you a place where you can put all your global variables. I've then got an enumerator set up. So an enumerator is effectively a numbered list without the numbers. It just gives you the opportunity to give display names, so it makes your life a lot easier rather than just organizing things through integers. So if we look here, I've got a topics enumerator and a lines enumerator. So to add an enumerator, if you come to Blueprints and click on enumeration, I won't do that now, but basically rename it and then double click it, and then you just set up your list. 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines in that case. And with my topics enumerator, my display names are widget, blueprint, framework, blah, 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 blah. Carrying on, okay? Those enumerators are exposed on that setup actor, and here you can now see that they've appeared as drop downs, so they are just those lists. That will make sense in a moment. I take my lines enumerator, and then depending on what I've selected here, so 4 lines in this instance, when I press play, that gets passed in and written to the game instance, which has a reference to the, it's blank here, but I'm setting it. So that then will become 4 lines. I then access that later in the lesson HUD here. 5 lines. Here we are. So here, I go to the game instance, get game instance, I find out what that lines enumerator has been set to, and then I use a switch on lines enum to affect the position, in this case, of the slot text contain. So I'm literally just moving it on the Y axis up and down based on the setting the screen position. So that text container, top left hand corner, gets moved up and down, and this is a kind of layout preference for me, so that it's always a minimum of 2 lines, hence me not having a 1-line option, 2, 3 or 4, that based on that space it will center it. And I've just done that by actually moving the canvas slot. So we're getting it, we're understanding which one we've selected, and then affecting the position down here. So that enumerator basically from my setup actor writes to the game instance and then writes it and affects the layout of the widget. So a few other things that I'm doing. For my setup actor, again, I'm just creating a game instance reference so I can easily access it rather than necessarily using get actor of class. There's a video about get actor of class and its pros and cons also. And then this is just a bit of sort of housekeeping, making sure that when I launch the game, it's launching to the resolution that I want, using set screen resolution and then applying the settings. So those 3 in combination do that for me. So looking down through our sequence, we've done the first 2. Then here, set some of the settings. So again, using a switch on the topics enumerator, I'm defining what that color value is. This color value is a local variable here, which isn't exposed, but as part of my flow, I'm wanting to set the color and this text, which is my topic text, before I move down to creating the lesson widget, because I'm then passing the color value and the text through into that create widget, so that when that widget is added to the viewport, it's updating this text and the color is being used to drive some of the other visual elements of the widget, but mainly the world. That will make sense also in a moment. So I'm setting the color and I'm setting that text. So that's the next bit of the flow. Then I come down to the 3rd pin. So then what do? I look to see if the local HUD which I'm setting here, if it's valid. If it isn't valid, then create the widget. If it is valid, remove it first and then create the widget. So here I'm creating the lesson HUD. I've then got some variables that I'm passing through. These are all exposed. They're all local here to my setup. They're all exposed here, and these are the ones that I am updating here. Title 1, whether it's bold 1, is bold 2, blah, blah, blah. So all of that is being edited on a case-by-case basis, and it's being pushed through into the widget. I'm then setting that local HUD just in case it hasn't been set before, i.e. isn't valid. It's being added to the viewport, and then I'm hiding the mouse controller, but still giving me control over interacting with some of the buttons. I didn't show that. Let me just show that again. I showed it for the clouds, but just to remind you of what I was doing earlier on in earlier videos. Let me just find the position. So I would come here, I would click the button, and then it would play the music in the background that you can hear. And then when I rolled over this top button, this was just the way that I set it up.
Fascinating.
And click through, it would play the animation and then quit, basically go back to the editor. So that was how I was doing it initially, just to save on editing. But I've cut all that out now and I just do a screen grab. It's much simpler. Coming to the fourth pin, we are then looking at changing a few things, just to randomize things really every time I launch it. So I am looking at the directional light, making sure it's set to white. I'm rotating it, i.e. changing the position of the sun in the sky, using some random float in range, but I'm just getting the light component, setting it to rotation. I'm then getting the exponential height fog, taking the color value that we set earlier on in our flow based on the subtopic, and then I'm affecting the color of the fog, but I'm also affecting the post-process, which is a component within my setup. I'm affecting the scene color tint to also pull in that color value, and I'm taking that color value and adding it to my game instance. So I've got it as a global variable as well, should I want to reference it. Coming back over here, pin 5. So here I am looking at those booleans again, which are exposed. Is bold 1, is bold 2, is bold 3, is bold 4. Just to remind you here, is bold da 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 da. And it's effectively just bolding up the font should I require it. So wrong blueprint. So I'm saying, okay, if it's true, do nothing, because at the moment I have already set it to bold. It's bold by default. So I'm basically saying if it's false, get line 1 and reset the font. And I've just promoted that to a variable and changed the font settings here to light and just promoted it once so I can edit it in one place, and it affects each of those 4 lines which I have got set up as the targets here, and then give an individual Boolean control over those, so just through another sequence. Then we have got the randomized clouds. So that bottom left, actually that's not quite true. Here's the randomized clouds code, which is get actor of class, accesses the volumetric cloud actor, and then I'm just randomizing some of the settings of that. So the bottom altitude layer between a random float of 0 and 20, set the layer, the height of the clouds, and then the max distance. So I've just put in some figures so that every time I press play, it's just not the same thing as the starting point. And then you'll note I did put a retrigger. It doesn't necessarily need to be in that place, actually, thinking about it. Because when I'm retriggering, it's doing all of those things again, which isn't entirely necessary. But I am wanting it to... Am I wanting it to do all that? Not really, because it's done all that already. It's actually, look, I can even move that, and it would be less weighty. If all I'm wanting to do is affect the clouds, I could just put that there, really. Let's have a look at that. Should do exactly the same thing, yeah. So it's just triggering the clouds instead of everything. So I just wanted to show you again what we were actually pushing through to the widget. So as mentioned before, we've got the text variables, title 2, 3 and 4. We have the topic, which is this variable which I'm setting here, just again, so it's all in one place based on our switched enumerator. And then also passing through whether the explainer boolean is true or false, and the same again for the 5-minute series, whether that's true or false. And you know, as other series come online, I'll just add to this. And then I'm also passing through the category color. So all of that is being taken across to the lesson HUD and being written to these local variables, just with the same names, that are exposed on spawn, and that's important. If the exposed on spawn isn't checked there on each of those, when I create the widget, they won't appear here, and therefore we can't just pass those through the HUD. So a few things. So event pre-construct, image 4 and 6. What are image 4 and 6? I thought I'd rename them all. Not quite. What do we have in image 4 and 6? Ah, okay. So you'll see image 4 is my graphic for the explainer series, so a big X that goes over the whole graphic. And I'm going to do a series which is just sort of 5 minutes. So if I look at that, that is the graphic that I want to show on that. So by default, because the majority of my videos aren't either of those two series, I am just hiding those and setting the visibility of those two images. Badly named. I will change that in a moment. Coming down from that, so on event construct, we are writing a reference of the HUD to the game instance, again, just to be able to access it elsewhere. It's sort of become a bit of a habit. We've gone over this already in terms of seeing how many lines are being used. If the explainer boolean is true, so coming back to setup in the world, now explainer is true because that's the video that we've just set, so we had that X graphic when I launched it. But if I wanted it to be part of my 5-minute series, I'll just click that instead, and now it will load the other graphic instead. So a big 5 on the right hand side there, yet to be completed. So watch this space. Coming back to the lesson HUD, so explainer, if it's ticked, then make that visible, but tint it the color that we've brought through. Okay. If it's the 5 minutes, which we've just switched, same thing, make it visible. Fairly straightforward. So when we are clicking the start button, so the start button, to remind you, was this button. So when we clicked that, it got rid of the widget that was on the screen and then triggered a post-process effect, which is in our setup. So here you'll see in our setup I've also got these custom events which are triggered from the widget. So we've got the fade, so this post-process which I've just dragged out over on a timeline. I'm changing the blend weight. I'm just fading it out basically, which is what happens when we click that button here. And then alongside that, what else do we have? We've got a couple of triggers for the audio. So playing the music and setting the volume, which all happens, that's on the mouse down when I hit the topic button. So if we look at the buttons, that's probably the easiest way of doing it. Start button. And we just look at on clicked. This is where we were before. So we removed ourself, this widget, from parent, which is the viewport. I don't know why that's in twice. It doesn't need to be. After that, we're adding a new widget, which is just the logo widget. As you recall, we just came to a screen where we showed the Unreal Engine logo after I click that button. And then we go into sequence. So I'm going back via the game instance, getting hold of the setup reference and triggering that custom event, which is triggering the post-process blend weight fade. And the reason I'm doing that is because a timeline can be in an actor blueprint, but it can't be in a widget blueprint. So I'm having to trigger it over here. I'm also then just waiting a few seconds and then I'm quitting the game, hence coming out of the launched game and going back into the editor, which is what I sort of demonstrated earlier. A couple of things with the other button. Coming back here, this is our other button, topic button. So you'll see I've got unclicked again. Again, I'm going to the setup. Don't need to particularly, but I just wanted to keep everything in the setup actor. And then I'm triggering that custom event, which is start music. Which is here, start music. And those eagle-eyed among you would have noticed I used this after the post-process fade. And then on the Retrigger button, which is that hidden button down here, Retrigger button. I've just hidden it by making the, what have I done? It's just got nothing in it, basically, but it still works as a button. And I'm just retriggering, as we saw before, which we've just moved that custom event to just randomize the clouds again. One thing to note, when you are exposing your variables here, the order of these, as you'll see, is the order that they'll appear here. So obviously I wanted it to feel quite logical in terms of 4 lines, what they are, what the topic was, and whether it needed to be launched. So to give you a kind of nicer layout and just manage those variables better, just make sure that you put them in the right order here, and it'll just correlate with how they are exposed on the actor. When you select your actor, of course, in the world outliner and look at the default subcategory, that then just shows any variables that you have exposed. So that's it really. It was more really to show you more about creating widgets and passing information through, and I hope that's been of use.
Live long and prosper.